Routine choreography and elbow chances and she was just like. Yeah, like so. I mean, that's right.
Okay. Okay. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
And then if I pin it, does that work with you, or do I need a spotlight?
Yeah, we can move these a little bit. Make it a little bit wider here.
Okay, here we go. Yes.
No.
Yeah, closer.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, better. What were these?
Yeah, so we check. Yeah.
Maybe Jack.
If you do that, it'll like. Hold on to that.
And should I start sending people in?
Yeah, I think.
I
Three, so I guess we'll share.
Yeah, whoever's gonna be here.
Okay.
And like, yeah.
We're gonna bridge, federal employee at the end of the but.
What's the morale like
I'm
there?
sorry?
What's the
Very
morale?
low.
There.
But I'm being paid to all nothing, ironically,
Yeah.
not the most efficient for government work, but there are work cases in the area.
Oh, it talks about efficiency.
Started.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to do
Let's try to fill the ones that are like. More that way. So they don't want your back. I mean, it's impossible. It might be nice. That ones are gonna be up front here.
You guys want to sit? Sean?
Is it,
You guys want to put some of those extra here about?
oh yeah, the extra sheet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
I guess. We'll just take the ones we're sitting in.
Yeah.
Jackie, that's for you.
Oh, I didn't.
Why are you down there?
Receipts for me. Okay. Thank you. It's fine.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Kapal's Washington Leadership Program. My name is Shama Ahmed, and I'm the Managing Director at Kapal. At Kapal, we cultivate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander public service leaders for providing formative professional experiences and various growth opportunities. This includes our annual public service scholarship and internship program, a roundtable series, a robust mentorship program, and also tonight's signature Washington Leadership Program. Our 2025 WLP series was pulled together by a group of our S&I, which are our scholars and intern alumni group, who have worked really hard for the past couple of months to plan this series out for you all. Tonight's session, How Does DEIA Affect Me, will revolve around the meaning of DEIA initiatives, as well as the impact on the NHPI community and intersectional communities. There will be an audience survey following the panel discussion, and panelists will respond to a Q&A as well. We invite attendees to stay after the session for a short networking session, and we encourage you to follow and join our conversation tonight on social media using the hashtag WeAreKapal. Thank you to our speakers and panelists this evening for spending their time with us and to all of you for joining us. A very special thank you to our 2025 sponsor, the DC Mayor's Office on Asian Pacific Islander Affairs, MWAPIA, for making programs like tonight's possible. And also a very special thank you to Bank of America for hosting us tonight. And before we kickstart, I will invite Nina An from Bank of America to do a quick welcome, and then we'll hand it over to Jackie.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to DC. Who's out of town? How are you enjoying your time in DC so far? Good? How many weeks in are we? One? Week 1. 3? Okay, so well, welcome to DC. Welcome to our space. We're delighted to be able to host you all, our future leaders. We at the bank are very committed, and that's what I wanted to express to you all. We are committed to DEI, although now we're changing the words a little bit, at least our company. So diverse is still a word, but diversity, we know out in this space might be a little bit of a challenge for some organizations and sometimes, I guess, for our government, this government anyway. So, but we just wanted to welcome you and know that Bank of America, we are committed to the community, to the API community, all diverse communities, and we stay as strong, steadfast in our commitment. And so hopefully you all will enjoy this time. Hear from the wonderful speakers. You're going to hear some terrific things. We at the bank say that we want to be a great place to work, right? And so I know you guys are out in the civic space, but should you find yourself looking for, a different avenue, please consider Bank of America. Look us up and know that we are investing in the community as always, and will continue to do throughout the years, no matter the circumstances. So just wanted to welcome you. I wanted to also acknowledge 2 of my teammates who are here, Mike Reyes and Srini. Where is he? Yeah, he's out there. But let us know if we can, answer any questions you might have about Bank of America, careers here at Bank of America. But thank you again for your time, spending your time investing in yourself and in the topic that is so important to our community. So enjoy. Thank you.
And over to Jackie, our moderator for tonight.
Great. Hi, my name is Jackie Wong, I use she, her pronoun. My day job is I'm a senior legislative analyst at the National Women's Law Center. That's a fancy way of saying I do a lot of congressional advocacy when it comes to gender justice issues. And I am originally from New York, best city in the world. I don't know if we have any other New Yorkers here. Oh, yes, amazing. Okay, fantastic. But really glad to be here, and I'm also a Capel board alum. But I'd love to pass it off to the panelists to do some quick introductions. You all may need to turn your mics on. So let's start with you, Nick, and then we'll just go down.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick LaFan. I'm currently, my day job is I'm an operations analyst at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but I'm here representing Noval DC, the National Organization for Vietnamese American Leadership. It's a nonprofit that promotes sustainable leadership in the Vietnamese American community, helping to promote the next generation of leaders, as well as to help advance Vietnamese culture to the American mainstream. And I'm happy to be here. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, but so I don't know if there are any Texans here. Oh, hey, hello. But yeah, so happy to see you all, but I've been here for 15 years in DC, and it's a great place. So I'm hoping that while y'all are here, whether or not you're here for a short term or long term, that you definitely get involved with all the activities and organizations that you hear you.
Hi everyone, my name is Zarna Shah Durham. I was born and raised in India. I moved here about 10 years ago, to the week actually. And I work in clean energy industry. So I've worked in a lot of mission-oriented organizations, and that has been a continuous thread. I am also on the board for Capel, and very, very pleased to be here today.
Evening, everyone. My name is Zach Hang. I am a DC area native, so I grew up here in Virginia, right across the river. I'm here in my capacity representing Ascend as one of their strategic advisors for corporate partnerships. So simply put, that means I go to big companies and fundraise. But I've spent a long time in corporate America across different functions, different industries, mainly in the management consulting and technology and human resources. So for some of the big brands, maybe smaller brands you may have heard of, like Accenture and Deloitte. My most recent stint has been with Vanguard, the financial services asset management firm up in Philly, where I reported into the chief diversity officer as one of their senior DEI officers. That was my most recent stint. I got a lot of stuff going on, as some of those who know me well know, but I'm sure we'll get into some of that in a bit. So thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, great. Zach, why don't you hold on to the mic, because I know you told us a little bit about yourself, but I'd love to ask each of you if you could describe how you got to where you are today and share a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. So my journey is winding. It's certainly not linear by any stretch of the imagination. Started off linear, but started to branch off and to do other things. But it really began very technical. I started as a database architect for the state government in Florida shortly after graduating from Florida State University with a degree in IT. But over time, I realized my passion wasn't in technology, wasn't in the systems. It was really more in the people, right? And so through that, it led me down this path of consulting, where it's very human focused. Like I said, spending time with firms like Accenture, Deloitte, and actually Booz Allen Hamilton as well. Really helping clients navigate technology and organizational change. But it's through those experiences that I really found myself energized by the human side of that change. All those changes through coaching, leadership development, culture building, right? And that passion ultimately led me to Vanguard, where I just mentioned I was most recently. And that was such an eye-opening experience, because I got an opportunity to work across the global enterprise, working with our chief executives, C-suite leaders across the enterprise, really shaping those enterprise-wide strategies across equity and inclusion in all the regions. So thinking about what legal implications that might come up was something that I never really had an opportunity to do when I was working in other roles that are more US focused. But a major inflection point for me was actually getting involved with Ascend, like I said, representing what I'm representing today. And if you're not familiar with Ascend, it's a global network of business professionals working to advance Asian representation in corporate America, simply put, from the classroom to the boardroom. So it's a life cycle organization where no matter where you enter our ecosystem, whether early in your career or late into your career, as senior leaders and executives, we can help you get to that next point on your journey, whatever that may be. And so I've had the privilege to serve as both locally and nationally. So I served as the former president of the DC area chapter for about 5 years, 4.5, 5 years here. And now I support the national headquarters that is in New York, but I'm based here. And then what really I like to reference Ascend a lot, because it's served as a sandbox for me to explore my passions and interests. And so that's where things start to branch off. And I got an opportunity to serve as the VP of marketing prior to taking over as president. And that's where I started to hone my skills and even my passion areas around social media marketing and photography and all the creative things that I didn't really get to do in my day job. That led to me launching a social media marketing business. And then much later on, I'm now a co-owner and partner in a restaurant here in Virginia as well. It's called Union by Potomac. It's across the river in Arlington. I may have a surprise later for all of you, but we'll get to that later. But it's all I have to say is things may seem like there's only one path forward, but as you explore your passions, your interests, they will inevitably evolve. So I would challenge all of you to just follow your instinct and follow your gut, right? And take all the information that you can from your mentors and your peers, and just try to carve your own path forward. But I certainly didn't think I would find myself in the restaurant business at all. But here I am, right? And it's a very unique opportunity for me to really think about how to diversify my career portfolio. So yeah, that's a bit about my path. I still have a foothold in corporate America through my role within Ascend, and I maybe at some point may consider going back to corporate. Who knows? But hopefully that was enough. Was that good, Jackie?
That was great. Thank you, Zach. Awesome. Sorry.
All right. So similar to Zach, my path has also not been linear. I currently serve as the Director of Lifecycle Strategy at Clean Choice Energy, a local energy company, and I did not think I was going to be doing this. It all started because 4 years ago, I'm like, how do I make an impact as an individual? And I started looking at mission-oriented organizations. Like that has been my thing. And what's interesting is that the path doesn't have to be linear as long as there's a common thread pulling through. Like I see like in your career path, there was a common thread altogether. For me, it has also been people. It has been purpose. So as much as I love where I am today, I think as long as there's a mission and a purpose, I know that I will be fine no matter where I go. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a straight line. You can make it whatever you want it to be.
Thanks. I think that, so I mentioned earlier I was from Houston, Texas. However, when I was 8 years old, I actually moved overseas. My father was a chemical engineer and worked on oil refineries. So at 8 years of age, I moved to Saudi Arabia, right? Went to an American international school. And I think that part of my path was shaped by both my heritage and also the environment I grew up in. Being in Saudi Arabia, I was a third culture kid, American expat, grew up with all these different permutations of identity. So a multitude of cultures. But at the same time, as a Vietnamese American, the son of Vietnamese refugees, I was also growing up in an environment where I was experiencing some solitude as well, because there weren't a lot of people like myself there. And that kind of drew me to these type of activities where I wanted to seek more people like myself and seek more opportunities to learn about my background, my heritage, and the like. And when I got back to the States for college, I studied political science, both because I wanted, when you are an American abroad, when you come back, you kind of want to embrace your Americanness again. But at the same time, as the son of refugees, that has been provided with a lot of opportunities in this country.
But providing a lot of opportunities. All right. So having been provided a lot of opportunities in this country, it directed me towards service. And much to the dismay of my parents, who wanted me to be a doctor, I pursued, political science, government. I pursued when I first moved to DC, I worked for nonprofits, one called the Center for American Progress. And also I helped start Noval DC, which I'm representing up here today, because when I was involved.
Things back. When I was involved in these type of activities, oftentimes I found myself the only person that looked like me in the room, whether it was as a Vietnamese American or Asian American. And part of my drive was because of the fact I found myself lonely in these spaces to help bring more people into the spaces that I'm in. And so I think that regardless of what you do, as the rest of our speakers have outlined, that your path doesn't have to be linear, but I think for me, it was about, service and helping to, expand the ladder of opportunity for others. And whichever role I found myself in, as long as I was doing that, then I felt that I had my purpose.
Yeah, what I love and what I'm hearing from you all is this idea that I think a lot of young people here often feel anxiety about what's my next step? Like, what should I do? Should I know what my career should be? And what I hear from you all is a little bit of, it's okay, you'll figure it out, and you may kind of meander left and right before you find out where you belong. Nick, let's start with you. So we are here to talk about DEIA, that stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. But what does that mean exactly? And what does inclusivity mean to you?
So I think that we've all experienced present day times where the DEIA has gotten a bad rap and maybe a lot of misinformation around it. I think oftentimes it gets conflated with affirmative action, which regardless of what your position is on that, involves around more hiring and admissions, and DEIA is about sort of a more holistic experience in the organization or agency or school that you're part of, right? And I think to me, what it means is that is about creating an environment, a professional, educational environment that allows everyone to be able to basically unlock their human potential in that organization, in that space, as well as to help, teams and people be able to work in a productive and effective manner. And that's why, we see things like, mothering rooms or Section 508 and other sort of accessibility policies, or even just trainings that help us understand one another better and help us communicate with one another better. And so that I think that those things are obviously helpful and productive and help companies and organizations to be more successful. That's what it means to me. Just anything that pretty much helps groups of people who maybe have not experienced people like their coworkers or their classmates be able to mesh and succeed in a common goal.
I second what you said. I think I'll take it a little bit further. DEIA to me is about inviting others to join and making room for them to be present, but also to be able to influence. I think a lot of times where DEIA policies have fallen short is that we've invited people, we've made room for people, but we've not necessarily made room for them in the decision-making process. And I think that is something that we can push the envelope a little bit further.
I'll take it from a corporate perspective. I think what really is problematic is a lot of companies make DEI like accountability to a teamwork function. Just right, so I can get a baseline. Does anyone have a good understanding of what each of these letters actually mean? I'm going to go through them just so we start off in the same spot. So diversity, representation, how many people are in the room? Equity is how many of those in the room have access to opportunities. Inclusion is how many of those people in the room are we listening to? Are their voices heard? And then accessibility is how many of those people are actually participating, access to the activity. So it's really a difference between checking a box and cultural change. And so it's not a program, it's not an initiative, it's not a team, it's a framework for how we lead people. So think about that, right? It's how we frame all of our things that we do in support of leading our people in cultural change. And accessibility is often the most overlooked one. So that is what DEIA is. But inclusion holistically, to me, is really just simply put, people don't have to shrink to fit in. They can expand into who they truly are in the workspace and that they occupy. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, thank you. I have no idea if this mic is working, but I'm going to hold it up in case it is. But I think that's so helpful because you know, I have been in so many rooms where they're like, well, we have you, you're Asian American, you're a woman, so we checked off the box, but like, did I feel really respected and invited to provide input? That was sort of the bigger question. I would love to hear from you, maybe starting with Zarna, about some of the personal barriers you may have faced in your professional life, given your identity, or from any of the panelists here, you know, given your backgrounds or your heritage.
There have been, sorry about that. There have been quite a few. There's definitely a lot of subtle biases. People mispronouncing my name very frequently and intentionally sometimes. Or backhanded comments about my English. So, like I said, I came here 10 years ago, and when I first arrived, people often complimented me for, oh, your English is really good. Oh, we speak English in India. But there's one particular incident that stands out to me. I had someone correct my grammar, and then they added, I understand English is not your first language. So think about this. This is my first time in the United States. I am new. I have been here for 3 weeks, and someone says, I understand English is not your first language. And in that moment, something clicked in me. I said, I know, right? I speak 5 languages, and it's so hard to keep them all straight.
Hell yeah.
But I think in that moment, I thought it was a moment of power, right? I realized that I can either let them beat me down about my English, or I can really own it. But I think this is really just an important example of like being in a space where language is a barrier or your experiences are a barrier. There's a cultural fluency that is expected of everyone, and especially as immigrants or first-gen professionals, we might not know that. That is an unspoken barrier that I, at least in my role, continuously try to put down as much as possible.
So I would say there's this kind of stereotype, right, where Asians and Asian Americans are seen that not to have any sort of leadership ability. Stereotype, right? But there's a billion people in Asia. There's got to be a leader somewhere, you know what I mean? So I think that was one of the biggest things that I had to kind of overcome, both internally, but within the larger context of a company, right? What does Western style business and Western style leadership actually mean? You know, being second guessed on a variety of things, and just lacking that the right thing that gets you to that promotion, right? That's happened more times than I can count, right? But I have learned over time through coaching, through mentors, through peers, that there's a way you can be your true authentic self, but do so in a way that is kind of fits within a corporate space, right? There are verbal and nonverbal things. I dress differently than a lot of my peers. I tend to dress loudly. And that's just my way of saying, hey, I'm here to do the job, and I'm here to be listened to, and I'm going to command the room in the way that I feel is appropriate. But then one of the things that I also have done over my career is, every time I join a new company, when I remember the specific moment when I was joining Booz Allen at the time. This was many years ago, but my then career manager, my manager at the time, he was like, you know, welcome to the company, this, that, and the other. Do you have any questions? And I go, yeah, how do I get promoted? And he looked at me like I had a third head, and I was like, I just want to know the pathway. Like, I'm not saying I want to get promoted tomorrow, just like, how long does it take? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? I want a roadmap to kind of work towards, so that I know how to approach and navigate promotion to get to the next level. He was so taken aback by that. He was not an Asian guy, obviously. But I think that just is for me to kind of really say, hey, like, I know you hired me to do a job, but I'm also here to grow and learn and develop and provide more value to the company. So being able to assert yourselves in certain moments is going to really help you in navigating some of those very sometimes can be awkward moments. So I had to like really go get out of my own head in some of these things and not internalize some of these stereotypes and these tropes that are often affecting our community.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that point. We all sometimes experience imposter syndrome when we are in a room that we, lack the confidence or belief in ourselves that we know what we're talking about or know our stuff. And I think that especially when you're working on a team, you're going to have people of many different experiences there, different levels of experience. And especially when you're newer or younger or more junior, you may not feel that you have the ability or the expertise to be able to weigh in. And I think that when we were talking about obstacles, I think I've been in situations where I'm always the youngest one in the team. And sometimes I have that reluctance to speak up because you don't want to put yourself out there sometimes and get smacked down professionally. So I think that not literally, right? I've never been physically smacked down in a work environment, but I think that it's important for, as Zach was saying, to be assertive and overcome that, because if you know your stuff and you know your stuff, you're part of that team too. And part of the reason you're on that team is because they want someone that has what you bring to the table to weigh in, and that's how you help to grow in whatever environment that you're in, and also to help improve the team and whatever work product that you're producing together.
Yeah, thank you. That's the imposter syndrome thing it speaks really closely to me, I think. And I don't know, for folks who may identify as a woman in the room, like you often go into these rooms and I think you are taught to act a certain way, to not be aggressive, or be aggressive, but not too aggressive. And I have learned over the years that if you're just authentically yourself, that really delivers. People really receive that. So whether that is aggressive or whether that's softer, that is something that you should really, focus on honing and really believe in it. Because I have been in work environments where I have worked with very confident white dudes, and it turns out later that they got fired from their jobs because they lied or they exaggerated their abilities and all that stuff. That has actually happened in my career that I've seen. And I have found that I have a lot of value inherent, right, to my experience. And I just want to empower folks to feel that.
Can I throw in a quick stat or anecdotal piece of information that really underscores that point? Is Asians as a demographic are the most highly educated demographic in the country. In contrast, the least likely to get promoted in any workspace. And that actually drops even further for Asian women. So think about that, like the competency, the capability, never in question. But when it comes to promotion, why, right? A lot of these biases, like structural, organizational things that are in place to prevent advancement. So
yeah. And look at how Zach's dressed. I mean, like, why would you not want to promote this guy? Zach, can I ask you and all the panelists, what does leadership and empowerment as an ANHI person mean to you?
It means both pride and pressure. It means really actively disrupting the model minority myth. Everyone know what that is? A lot more heads that time. Great. Which really masks the real barriers to leadership advancement, to representation. And I think when you get rooms like this together to talk about these things and invite others that are not Asians into the room to hear about these challenges, to know that these challenges exist, to create some awareness around them, then you start to bridge the communities together. You start to have really meaningful, lasting conversations and provocative conversations, right? The strongest organizational cultures are having these conversations very openly. Think about Bank of America, right? They're fierce advocates in this space. So much to the point where they're constantly adapting to what the climate is currently, right? Nina mentioned that it's the straying away from diversity. I had the privilege to meet the new officer leading the functions. They're called the chief. She's called the Chief Opportunity and Inclusion Officer. So think about that, right? Still very much integrating the principles of DEI, but just saying it in a different way. And so for me, a lot of that leadership is really being able to be inventive, be innovative, adaptive, but really owning the space as an Asian American, owning the space as a leader. And those two are not mutually exclusive, right? You can be Asian American, you can be a leader, you can be an Asian American leader, right? And you can be a leader in all these different contexts. So it's really about opening doors and widening the hallways for others as you ascend. That was unintentional.
Okay.
But yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
It does, and we can always count on Zach to be on brand. So respect. Zarna, what does it mean to you?
Thank you. I think leadership to me is to be visible, to be responsible, and to be open to possibilities. And I say that because representation matters. Having examples that look like me, have similar experiences matters. But I want to be in that room and I want to be trusted to be leading in my own way. And I think that is often such an important feature of, like you mentioned, not getting promoted. It's often because we have these cultural biases in place. And I think the more we can lead with example and to be responsible and be trusted to be in those places, that to me is true leadership.
Yeah, I just want to echo all that and say that I think ensuring that you bring what you have with you, like what your story is, what your experience is. To me, leadership is about bringing the assets that you bring to the table into the conversation, into the work product, into the organization that you're part of. I think sometimes there's a desire to conform, and sometimes, yeah, we all want to fit in, but also I think as a leader, as an A and HPI leader, I think it's also important to like kind of wear kind of my experience on my sleeve too, so that the people who are in the room who may not have experienced what I experienced, for the communities that I'm part of, can learn about that too, and also be able to be your allies and join in when, especially, you're advocating for a policy or a change that's important to you and your community, or maybe even other communities too that they may not have felt. So yeah, just echoing what everyone else said, but also making sure that you bring yourself to the room too.
And sort of solidarity with other communities, like I think that is, you benefit yourself and you're benefiting others. That feels, it's all aligned to, it's the same goal. That feels very inclusive to me. I'm very proud of myself for drafting this next question, which is, what gives you hope in this moment? I know so many folks here came to DC and maybe we're hoping for a different kind of environment, or maybe are feeling a little bit scared about what's going on and sort of the chaos of the world. So, you all are seasoned leaders in this space. What gives you hope in this moment? Go ahead.
I guess what gives me hope is having been, I graduated in 2007, a long time ago, for real. But I think now there's definitely
a lot more representation and people in the room that look like me, that have experienced what I've experienced than when I first started. And I think that gives me hope, because even though the political situation or environment may ebb and flow and the pendulum may swing back and forth, I definitely have seen progress and increased opportunities for our communities, more so than when I first started my professional career. And now you have like roadmaps that will help you to navigate these spaces. There are
organizations like Ascend, like Novality City, that you can help navigate.
that will help navigate the different professional spaces that you enter into. So that's what gives me hope that in the years of experience that I've seen, there has been progress. That's not to say that there's not much that is still left to do, but that we are at a place where we can have the infrastructure to go beyond sort of these moments of difficulty. And I felt like I had to throw this in because I saw it recently and I love it so much. But when I was in school, I used to get food shamed for the things that I brought for my school lunch. And I saw this PSA from like New York City public schools called like "What's in Your Lunchbox," and they feature Asian American kids like showing off their cultural foods, and that's like a PSA program for New York City, which is incredible. So I just for me it's those little tidbits that give me hope and progress.
I love that example. I think it's really interesting. I struggle with feeling hope in these times, like probably a lot of you. But what really stands out to me is that I came here as an adult. I came here as a 25-year-old. And sometimes I'm like, did I make the right choices? I am a new citizen and I feel so much pride in my country. But I am like, this intentional distance from my family and my friends and the culture that I know, is this the right choice? Having said that, what gives me hope is the younger generation here. They're so unapologetically committed to the idea of freedom, and that is so inspiring to see. What's also inspiring is all of you people in the room here, like looking for careers in public service, even at a time when that feels impossible, right? And that to me is what really gives me hope. And I think I made the right decision, but ask me about that in a few years.
And I will just say, I know all three of these panelists personally, and we hang out, we've hung out in social situations, and we've, like talked about things that weren't work and all that stuff. And so to your point about like having each other, being in this space, finding other ANHBI folks, like just having fun, that is like, so that has like given me so much strength in my 9 years here in DC. So.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo what Zarna said. You all in the room give me hope, right? There has been surveying as of late, right? And the more and more surveys that are done, the themes start to surface, right? And one of those big themes is the younger generation, you all in this room, the future leaders of our country, really are demanding equity as a baseline, not as a bonus, as to any culture, right? So that rise in influence, that rise in cultural power and cultural presence, that gives me hope, right? The cross-community solidarity that we are seeing often in times of crisis, that gives me hope. It's finding strength in our communities that in building bridges, cross-cultural communities, those things are really inspiring and really powerful. So look to your Hispanic and Latino brothers and sisters, look to your African American brothers and sisters, right? Like we are all trying to lift and rise together. And I think one thing that's all too often thought of in context of corporate America, at least, is people think it's a zero-sum game. It's really not. I mean, if we band it together and say, we are not trying to fight over different slices of pie, we demand you grow the pie, like that's how centers of power start to grow, right? And so I'm inspired by my friends up here, all of you as well, to see what comes next in terms of how we keep organizations and companies accountable to the changing atmospheres and environments. So
I'd like to say, this to me, the ANHBI community here in DC is pretty small, relatively speaking, which in a way is very good, I think, in the sense that you can find people, you see the same folks at the same events, you start to make those connections, and those are like lifelong career connections, friendships, things like that. So any of us up here can tell you a little bit about the organizations we're involved with, how Kapal has brought us all together, but just wanted to make that plug for folks who are here in the summer. Okay, so my next question is, Nick, I'll start with you. What is surprising to you about the DEI debate, or what has surprised you, in this from context throughout your career? That-
I guess I've been involved in political organizing, politics and elections for a long time. And so it wasn't surprising to me to see DEIA policies get attacked. And obviously I was working and living in DC during the first term of this administration. So I understood ideologically where it was going. I would say some of the speed at which some of the changes were happening were a surprise, but on the flip side, it's also been surprising to see corporate America, see organizations also, uh, even when they faced pressure to get rid of maybe certain policies that promoted inclusion, that they stood firm and defended it as well. And so that to me was definitely a surprise. But I think I'm heartened, like my other panelists, in seeing how young people have responded to it as well. And I am optimistic that positive change will come in the future.
I'm a very data-driven person, so the whole thing about DEIA initiatives being rolled back is very surprising to me. Because you know what? It's good for business. It is so good for business when you have diverse, inclusive teams. Teams work better, they innovate more, they build trust faster. So every time we talk about DEIA initiatives being rolled back, I'm like, it's not great for us, but it's also not good for business. I don't understand where the decisions are coming from. And I think I'm often surprised by how politicized the idea has become. But like you said, we are holding organizations accountable. Everyone remembers Target was big during Pride, and this year they're not. People are holding organizations accountable. And I think that the expectation that equity is the starting point is that I think it circles back to just like how hopeful that makes me for the future, because it's good for business, it's good for people, and eventually we will want to be in that place again.
So I was actually going to reference your Target comment. So I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, it's quite obvious, right? When Costco comes out from their board and says, we're going to double down on this and we're not moving our position, their revenue skyrocketed, their stock price skyrocketed. Target, in contrast, did not, right? So very, very tangible business outcomes. So business imperatives, people have to recognize that. But I think two things that surprised me, right? One being in a formal DEI role at another company, I was surprised at the lack of resources available for the programs that are desired and initiatives that are desired. Company X says, hey, I want to do this. And we're like, show us the money. Oh, well, we're cutting budget, so we're tightening the belt here, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you want all these different things, you want the sun and the moon and stars, I can only give you the sun. So if you want other things, you got to open up the budget a little bit. So it's really like, how are organizations really doing what they say they want to do, like walking the walk, truly, rather than just talk the talk. And the other thing that was so surprising to me is how few people that were actually formally trained in this space are running whole functions in DEI. During the height of DEI, right, you saw so many people taking on these different roles simply because they represent some community, but really have no idea how to actually run a function and how to enculturate DEI principles and practices throughout the organization. It's like I said, it's not a set of programs, it's not a bunch of initiatives, it's really how do you affect organizational change? And that not knowing that fundamentally was so surprising that people didn't actually realize that. And so how do you quantify that? How do you use data-driven decisions to make sure that, you know, all the people that are coming in the organization understand, like, we are an inclusive workplace? How do you change hearts and minds of the people that are currently there to let them know, hey, we are adapting to our environment. We are wanting to be a best place to work for all people, that kind of thing, right? So there's a lot of philosophical things that people are just generally not aligned on. And I thought that was so surprising given how many people are practitioners in the space. But, you know, the thing that is still surprising to me is how much those job postings for DEI are still rapidly declining, while at the same time rapidly increasing. Because the reality is there's a big narrative out there, as we all know, being here, the center of the world, that DEI is going away, this, that, and the other. So let me just quash all of that right now. DEI is not going away. There is far more companies and organizations continuing to double down and invest in these sorts of initiatives and bodies of work that it's not going away. It's not going away. It may look different. It may sound different. It may be reframed in a way where it's more palatable to our people who don't believe in this kind of stuff. But it's certainly not going away. There are all these organizations up here that we represent can tell you, because there are partners coming to us on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. How do we partner with you all to advance culture and people in our organization? So for those of you who think DEI is going away, fear not, because it is not. It is here to stay.
If I may add to your point, I think one thing that's going to change is it's going to move away from being performative to actually be part of the culture of the organization. And I think if we're trying to look at the bright side, I do think all the hoo-ha about DEI not being beneficial or it going away is going to make organizations change the tone of how they approach it and make it intrinsic to their processes, not just for an outward appearance. And I think that that could be a silver lining of everything that we're hearing about in terms of DEI.
Yeah, not to toot our horns, but I think Zarna, if our employers lost us, it would be a huge loss, right? And I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I really lament that prospect. But Hannah, do we have time for two more questions or just one?
I would say maybe just one more question.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna ask you to answer one of two questions. First, let me just get a show of hands actually from the audience here. How many folks come from an immigrant family? Okay, most folks here. And then how many folks would say that you come from maybe an underserved community or maybe a marginalized background? Like, for example, I'll say that even though I grew up relatively fine in terms of like income and stuff, my family immigrated here in the 80s. They had to build a life of their own, all that kind of stuff. So how many people does that resonate with, that, you know, you may come from a background that is not necessarily the status quo in America? Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that question was intended for all of you to raise your hands, but it's totally cool. And the reason why I asked that is because the last question I want to ask the panelists is, you know, either if there's one thing you want to share with this audience to take away, we'd love to hear that from you. Or what advice do you have to give to so many of these young folks here who, you know, are facing a future where maybe DEIA is going to be erased? What advice do you have for these folks, many of whom identify as somebody who comes from a marginalized or underserved community? So, Zach, do you want to start?
Sure. So I'll provide a bit of advice. I'll say your identity is not your obstacle, it's your asset. Your identity is not your obstacle, it's your asset. So learn the system, but don't lose your story. Take control of your narrative in every space that you occupy, because no one can tell your story better than you. So find your people, find your community, find your tribe, find your mentors, find your champions, protect your joy, but protect your identity and protect your assets, right? Be authentic and true to yourself, because that will come through and resonate far more than trying to fit some sort of mold that you're not comfortable with or doesn't feel right. Because I just remember, right? You're not a guest in these spaces that you are in. You already belong, or else you otherwise wouldn't be there. So claim your seat and know your worth, and don't let anyone else define your narrative. Storytelling is so incredibly important as you progress throughout your career, and your story will change. So how do you hone your story? How do you refine your story? How do you evolve your story that adapts to something that you are aspiring to achieve? So that's what I would leave you with, is just take control of your own narrative. Really get skilled at storytelling, especially your own.
Yeah, that was really nice. I think what I would like to say is learn the rules of the game, but don't be afraid to challenge them. You have so much more agency than you think, and you have way more support than you realize. Like, take a look at this room. There's a lot of people out here that are in similar spaces, experiencing similar things. So you don't have to do this alone. Find your people, like you said, find your people, and make sure you don't let your voice be drowned. So I think that's what I will say.
Wow, I gotta follow up these two. I think that to take it a step further, yeah, I think not just I think the hardest thing for me when I first came to the city was learning how to ask for help or find help in the spaces I needed it. Because we all can't do this alone, right? We're finding our people because it's important that you find the community that can help you get to where you want to go, and where you can help them get to where they want to go. And that is why I think it's important to not be afraid to seek help from the people who are part of your family or your chosen family, whoever that may be, and make sure that you be able to solicit help from those who you might not least expect. One of the biggest lessons I learned was the people who I thought would go to bat for me didn't, and the people who I didn't expect to go to bat for me did. So you never know who those people are. And I think that as you navigate your journey ahead, just be sure to know your stuff, know your story, but find your community, and also be willing to seek help when you need it.
I'll go to bat for you, Nick.
I love that. It's know your stuff and forget the haters. So everybody remember that. Can we get a round of applause for everybody? So we're gonna have time for Q&A, but Hannah, I think, is going to initiate a quick survey for all of
Yeah,
us.
so we're going to be handing out an audience survey for our virtual panelists. It'll be dropped in the chat box, but for our in-person attendees, if you could just pass this around. Your responses to the survey do help keep our programs running, so please do fill it out. But I think besides that, while folks are filling out questions, we can also get started with the audience Q&A. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. Virtual attendees, you can drop it in the chat box.
Thanks for joining us. That's great. So, I think the implicit assumption of the panel was that DEIA is a good thing, and I happen to agree. But I think, as was mentioned, it's in the news. The president campaigned on DEIA being bad, attacking immigrants, attacking trans folks, and a majority of Americans, 77 million Americans, voted for him. Why do you think DEIA is controversial? Why do you think it has negative connotations? And what can we do to counter that?
Great question. Does anybody want to start?
I think so. I'm actually going to refer to something you said. There is such an implicit threat about for people that are in positions of privilege. They think we're taking a piece away from their pie, right? And I think the whole purpose of DEI was to increase the size of the pie, not take away from their piece, but I think there's such a misconception about that, and that really drives the kind of hatred and anger towards DEI.
I'll add to that, right? It's fundamentally preying on the fears of people, right? Fear of losing space, losing voice, losing power. And so when the narrative that the current administration is pushing right now is, if we allow X people from this community or that community, you're going to lose your seat at the table, which could not be further from the truth, right? So like that is really what is causing this discourse around this narrative of DEI is bad. That's fundamentally what it is. It's fear-based. It's saying exactly that. Like, we gain a seat here, we lose a seat there. It's not that at all.
I think I'll just add that to Clifton's point that he raised, that I think it's also important that when we do establish or embark on DEIA initiatives, that, because the thing is not just performative, right? And I think that's where it gives, sometimes when it's very performative and just superficial, it gives people ammunition to be able to attack it as a useless thing or a worthless thing. And so I think for all people who support DEIA culture, and that we should be able to make it real and make it so that the people in organizations can be influential, that it is effective, that it is, value added, not just performative actions.
Yeah, I mean, just to cite specific examples, right? Like what a lot of women, especially who are on the conservative leaning side, fail to realize are things like maternity leave is a DEI initiative, right? Things like paternity leave for partners, DEI initiative, all these different leave things, access, being able to have some sort of ancillary device to help you do your work better and more effectively, and continue to provide value to your organization, and accommodation. That is a DEI program, right? So like, I think it's just, I'm getting worked up about it, just because like, it frustrates me to no end how people can cherry pick certain things of a holistic philosophy and a holistic framework that really is built to ensure that everyone can rise together and everyone is included at the table, not to exclude or single out any one group.
I think I saw a question from over here. Or maybe I was imagining.
I got a question. So obviously, I come from LA, where there are currently a lot of ice cream with fires, and then the National Guard being involved, and Marines being called in. We live in a very polarized society where both the, I guess, underrepresented minority groups and majority groups are in a clash kind of situation. But obviously, you guys are all, throughout your careers in more experienced position than we are. What sort of methods have you guys, thought of or used to assimilate to the system, but also keep your bounds and bring in the value that you have, from your eyes?
Sorry, just repeat the question one more time.
So just how do you abide by the rules that the majority group has set in place, while also bringing in the value that you have that is very unique and mine?
I really worked on my language and writing skills, and obviously in a Western society, speaking up and speaking loudly is really valued, but maybe in an Eastern setting, it's not so much. I think I had to grow up in a home where I had to maybe make myself a little bit smaller, but growing up in America, I was like, oh, the way I succeed is by, raising my voice. And I think that's definitely something that I had to adapt and kind of create from nothing, really.
I can second that. I grew up in an environment where I was just grateful to be here, right? I was just grateful to be in the room. And with time, I have come to realize not only do I deserve to be in this room, but I deserve to experience the joy and the energy and the influence that comes from being in that room. And I think that has been a learning experience. It wasn't natural to me, like you, Jackie. It wasn't natural to me. But over time, I have become confident in the spaces that I'm occupying. And some of that is really just time. You have to walk into a space and believe that you belong there, and eventually you will.
Yeah, I'll just kind of hone in on kind of the language, right? It's not about assimilation, right? For me, assimilation means conformity. It means fitting into a system that doesn't necessarily work for all of us. So I like to use acclimation instead, right? So you're changing the things that you feel like you need to change in order to kind of navigate the world around you. And so I say, and this is not very Asian, but some rules are meant to be bent, some rules are meant to be broken. And so learn the systems and structures that you have to kind of work within, but know when to assert, challenge, right? How do you challenge the status quo in a way where it's appropriate in the context? So you can ask questions, like, you don't have to say, I disagree with that. You can say, hey, can you explain a little bit to me why things are this way? You're saying the same thing. One's a bit more of a softer approach, right? So a lot of it's about how do you work within the system, but you have to know the system. You have to know the rules that have been laid out in front of you to know what rules you can bend, what rules you can break. Like, I guarantee you, all of my professional peers here, when they say 9 to 5, we've all left before 5 at one point or another. If they say they haven't, they're lying. Like, it's a rule you can bend, right? Or a rule you can break. But it's also about ensuring you have the right champions with you in that conversation. So if you're like, hey, I'm gonna go way outside the lines on this, you got my back. Yeah, Nick, I got your back. It's really about it. Acclamation.
So I have a political organizer background, right? So I think I in the past have had to, canvass or phone bank or talk to people, absolute strangers, to try to convince them to agree with this policy or vote for this candidate, et cetera. And I think a lot about it is establishing credibility too in any environment you're in. If I'm not just parachuting in and talking to this person or trying to, the moment I walk into a room, like change things immediately. It's about understanding like your audience, understanding the people you're working with, and then from there being able to collaborate and find common ground and therefore be able to change things. But I will say, you wouldn't believe how many times I've asked the question that like, why do we do things the way we do things? And the answer has been, it's always been that way. Right? There's no rhyme or reason why. There's no legitimate or reason that people can argue or point to. It's how it always was, right? And sometimes, I've been in organizations where I asked why the policy was the way it was, and they just frankly copy and pasted it from somewhere else, right? And just some lawyer somewhere had to create the policy for this at this place, and they just copied it from somewhere else without kind of thinking about it more. So because somewhere else had it already established. So I think asking questions is important, because sometimes you'll learn that there's no strong reason it exists the way it does, and you're able to change it into a way that benefits everyone.
And guess what? If you're like, hey, I want to try a different way to do this, and it's better, more efficient, higher quality, guess what? You're going to be in line with other opportunities to go do other things, and you're actually breaking the rule of doing the way it's always been done.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna keep talking about this because I love to talk, but to your question about, what are we doing different from maybe how we grew up is my parents don't have any idea of what I do, right? Like I tell them what I do, I'm like, I send these kinds of emails, I make these kinds of phone calls, I talk to these kinds of people, and my Chinese family has told me there's not really a single word we have for what you do in China because the sort of lobbying, the congressional advocacy stuff doesn't exist in that same form. I mean, maybe they're wrong, but I think being here, doing politics, doing what I consider social justice, gender justice advocacy is in and of itself like a very different thing than what I grew up in and what I knew. And so that to me feels almost like I'm doing what I think is like America, right? Like I'm doing what I want to do in America and what Americans do and, you know, the Americans that I respect. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that really came to mind for me. Other questions?
I know that a lot of companies and organizations are in a really difficult position and the risk of using federal funding is very real. But in your opinion, do you think we're inherently losing something by reframing DEI and using other language to be more palatable? Or is it that as long as the core of it is the same, it will be able to have the same impact?
I guess my quick answer is yes and no. I think that from a practical standpoint, I understand the reframing to try to save what you can save, right? I mean, you know, I think in politics and government, there's a lot of compromise, there's a lot of, you know, trying to save what you can save and trying to help who you can help, because at the end of the day, we're just passing the baton to like the next person, right? And, you know, speaking as someone who works in government, whatnot, like we do the work that we have in front of us. And then, you know, obviously, you know, this isn't like the 60s where people kept in the same job for like 20, 30 years. I mean, some people still do, but, you know, a lot of us will move to different opportunities. So I just see whatever role I'm in, whether it's, you know, in the board that I serve on, in my, you know, job, professionally, my day job, is that I'm just, you know, passing the baton to the next person, keeping things good, improving things until I move it on to the next person. So I think that there is something to be said that, you know, retreating from the language, like, is of course harmful, you know, because it's in a way, it's an implicit way of trying to like walk away or run away in some companies' cases from these values. But I think that, you know, there is some positive in being able to maintain the core of what it is, so that these environments, these work environments or school environments or government environments can still create, you know, that framework, regardless of what it's called, to improve the situations we're in. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I'll chime in, right? My answer is a firm no. We're not gonna lose anything. And I say that because, like I said earlier, there was a lot of people that were thrown into this work without really truly understanding how to get the work done. And so at the core of it, the practices and principles on organizational maturation, talent development, and talent management, like all of those things are core to a business cycle, or core to an organizational kind of growth and development. So the core work is always going to exist. What it's called may change, and inevitably will change. Like before it was D&I, diversity and inclusion, then it evolved to diversity, equity, inclusion, then it evolved to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and then it evolved to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging. So there's all these different things that are kind of defined in order to delineate certain aspects of this work. But the work itself is not going to change. It's always going to be baked into some core function of the organization, or else the organization will cease to exist. And that's just the reality.
Any other questions? Yeah, good.
I was wondering, so I've been having conversations about how because like the Asian diaspora is like so wide, it's often hard to come to, I guess like the same conclusion or work towards the same goal. And so I was wondering if you have specific advice on how to come together with those like who are also ANHPI but have different standpoints to like work together.
I keep thinking about my mom, who's like totally in a different political sphere than me, but who I love, and it's a really great question. I don't know. Folks,
I mean,
your thoughts?
I had the same sentiment.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents and I have very different political ideologies. And I think a lot of us from our generation can kind of share that in common. I mean, the thing that comes to mind is just being able to have a conversation. Tough conversations are tough by nature. And if you are not open to a opposing view, an opposing narrative, to understand at least where the person's coming from, then you're dead on arrival, right? Like you have, like on both sides, right? No one side is more right than the other. No one side is more ethical or more morale than the other. There are different points in the conversation where you can start to think about, how do I bridge this together? And that's what we as advocates in the community try to do, is bridge those communities together. As you said, the Asian diaspora is vast. There are extremely politically right-leaning people. There are extremely left politically leaning people. There are a lot of moderates in the middle. There are middle left, middle right, and everything in between, right? But it's the people who lack the kind of interest in even understanding an opposing view is where things start to fall apart. So I'm not shy about it. My parents are extremely right-leaning. Watch Fox News every single day. But like, I'm able to have a conversation with them and learn about why they think certain things. When I got into DEI as a formal job at a private corporation, my parents were like, I don't know if you should do that. And I'm like, well, I'm going to. So, but tell me why, right? Like, tell me why you think I should rethink this job. And, we went down this conversation of like, oh, well, representation is important, but then it's like, whatever, right? So like, all I have to say is, what I think really lacks is constructive conversation in today's society, being able to really say, okay, I disagree with your viewpoint, but I still like you as a person. So those things are often conflated, where, oh, I just disagree with your viewpoint, but so I can be friends with you, or I don't want to get to know you. You know what I mean? Like, we're human. Like, we're gonna disagree, but how do we disagree constructively? And how do we bridge those things together? And that's how we create this cross-cultural community of solidarity, is like knowing how to have those conversations in tough spaces. I don't know if I answered the question, but I want to kind of put it right there.
I think I want to tease a little bit of your response. There's something to be said about the fact that no two people are the same. There's never going to be another person that has the same set of problems and the same set of principles and the same set of priorities as you. And I think, yes, it is true that the Asian diaspora is so big and so massive. And that's, in my opinion, that's what makes us really beautiful. But even in the same spaces with somebody that you're so culturally aligned with, you might not agree on everything. There's always going to be those differences. But I think what she said about looking past those differences and looking at the humanity of the person and like centering the conversation on that is essential. That is how we come together, because there's always going to be something we can agree on. But that's if we look for it. If we only look for things that we disagree on, that is all we will find. I think centering on that humanity is going to be very critical as we try to find a common goal for the diaspora.
And I'll even say, like, I see that materializing in the younger generations. Being able to extend that olive branch to say, hey, I disagree with you, but like, we can still be friends. But I want to learn more about your position. Like, can you tell me more about why you think this way? I want to, I just want to understand you a bit more. And just, again, being very centered on the humanity aspect of it, so.
The only thing I'm not gonna get anything to say is I used to be much more militant about this. I used to think, I'm not talking to people who I don't agree with, but recently I've been listening to a lot of social scientists talk about how, especially for people who read misinformation, read my mom on WeChat, is that you can't counter them with saying you're wrong and these are the facts and whatever that stuff. It's actually the way that you win people over is that you have to have a conversation that is a back and forth and that actually involves you listening to what they are saying and indicating to them that you are listening and understanding. And I find that really interesting, and I think I've been trying to think about that more.
I mean, that's like perfect, because one of the pieces of advice I got early on in my career as it relates to kind of building relationships in the workplace and stuff, because you'll inevitably come across people you don't really like to work with. But it's listen to understand, don't listen to respond.
There's another question in this space.
Yeah, I guess, I think like all of you kind of mentioned that like something that brings you hope is like the younger generation. And I guess just like something I've been thinking about is like a lot of us here are like API or A and HBI, like some of us are like first gen, but like we're also young people. And I think it's like interesting because a lot of us here, like young people are like what bring people hope, and like we're like there's a lot of pressure on us to make change, but then the minute that change makes people uncomfortable, people become like interested in that, especially people who are older or more ingrained in different hierarchies, whether those are political, corporate, whatever. And I think we're also seeing young people be punished. Like I think like as a student on the college campus right now, we're seeing young people who are trying to make change that makes people uncomfortable, be punished by their administrations, the government, whatever. So I guess just like thinking back to when you guys were our age, not to call you older.
That's what I heard. It's fine. That's fine.
But, like just like, what advice you have for us as like young people who like presumably all want to make change that matters, but kind of like run into this like weird like contradiction when we actually like try to do that.
These questions are fire.
I will say it can be overwhelming to think about all the, like, we obviously, we all care about many different things, right? And it can be overwhelming when everything seems to be under fire at the same time. But I think it's also important to, pick and choose your battles. I think that's like a general life, like, I think piece of advice too, to pick and choose your battles. And I think it's not on you to change everything or solve everything or be the change for all of us. But I think that it's definitely one of the lessons I've learned is that I can't spread myself too thin and kind of focus on what I think I have control over. And there's a lot of things that we don't have control over. And I think it's important also not to harbor too much anxiety over those things, but where you can have control and where you can focus into, I think that's a way that I've learned when I was kind of in college and wanting to pursue many different things. I said, okay, well, I can't do everything, and sometimes that's hard, right? It's hard to close the door on something because you look back and wish what if and things like that. But I always say, like, for every door you like open, yeah, some doors get closed, but new doors open that you may never have been able to experience before. So that's sort of kind of my philosophy on life, that we only have a very short time on this earth. We're not going to be able to experience everything we can experience, but like don't feel like you're missing out on things that you weren't able to experience, because you're going to be able to experience things moving forward that wouldn't have if you harbored or stayed back and did these other things.
think I want to add something to your thoughts. I hear you when you say you feel the pressure, but I'm gonna put myself in an uncomfortable spot here for a second. Some of you might remember helping your parents with technology before they became independent and learned how to do this themselves. I feel like that. The reason why I say that is 10 years ago, DEIA or any of this was not even part of my vocabulary. Today, I am here talking about it, right? And I think a lot of that is because the younger generation has been talking about it. It's the center of the conversation, and it's forced me to learn and expand my viewpoint and to do something that I am very uncomfortable doing. So I do feel like my mother, you know, when I was trying to teach her how to use technology, but I think it's growth. And even though it may not seem like that to you, know that it's happening, and I am one such example.
Totally agree with both of what they said. I think it's funny to me a little bit because I think every new generation feels like they're the future of the next generation, right? I felt that when I was a little bit younger. And I'm sure future generations following you will still feel that as well. So I would say, as hard as it is to do, try not to let that kind of pressure compound unnecessarily. Control the things that you can control. But I would also say there are so many things that you can do that are within the context that you are within, right? So I said earlier to his question, in order to navigate the system, you got to know the system. I think a lot of what challenges that I've seen a lot of groups do is they try to change the system without actually knowing the system. And so part of making cultural, long-lasting, sustainable change is about knowing how to change the system once you know. So that means galvanizing a group of people around you to kind of understand the whole system, get champions, get mentors, get friends. Like, you have to know the system in order to change the system. That is just fundamental to any sort of change approach. And so when you think about all the changes you want to make, you have to first think, do I understand why it is the way it's currently? If it's just the way it's always been, then yeah, there's a lot of latitude to think about, okay, maybe we should do things different. Or if there's a policy or regulation that's in place to prevent some sort of change, very different. You have to go through a different set of processes to change those things. So know the system, learn the system, and that will help you navigate any sort of changes that you feel like should be made. But for the pressure thing, I don't know, I got nothing for you. Social media is like really turned that on its head. So yeah.
I think we have time for.
There is one question from the virtual audience, if it's okay to read out loud. So one of our cohort members, Audrey, she says, and brace yourselves, it's kind of long, but don't worry. I've been doing some reading more aligned with current events, and it's in this context that I encountered this quote. And the quote says, "It is an admirable thing in a politics possessed of a moral floor to believe one can change the system from the inside. That with enough respectful prodding, the establishment can be made to bend like that famous arc towards justice. But when, after decades of such thinking, decades of respectful prodding, the condition one arrives at is reticent acceptance of genocide, is it not at least worth considering that you are not changing the system nearly as much as the system is changing you?" And so Audrey asks simply, how can you change the system without it changing you?
These questions.
Oh, I know. Tough.
No, they're a bunch of smarties. Good question. I don't know if anybody wants to start.
Thesis, yeah.
I think we can distill it down to the how can you change the system without it changing, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's tough because by nature, we are all impacted by our environments. And so we are inevitably going to change based on our experiences, our lived experiences, based on our skill sets, based on the people with whom we interact. But it's really, I think, this kind of amalgamation of changes of like, how is an organization, the company, my people, my environment influencing how I evolve? But then what sort of ways am I asserting myself in order to say, hey, I think things can be better? And simply asking the question of, can this be done better, gets the ball rolling. I would say for a lot of people, myself included, change doesn't happen fast enough. But we can be either involved in the conversation and try to affect that change, or we can sit on the sideline and hope and pray someone else does it. But either way, there's going to be this kind of symbiotic relationship of change where, because of the changes you're trying to enact or try to influence, you are going to learn things. You're going to learn about the people, you're going to learn about the environment, the systems, the business, whatever the case may be. You're going to learn something that will inherently change your perspective. And if your perspective isn't being changed on a regular basis, however frequent, then you are not being open-minded to the things that are being offered in around you. So that's my long and winded way to say, you cannot prevent change within yourself by nature of how things evolve around you, but you can also be involved in the change that you want to have happen, or you can choose not to. So it's a lot of it's based on choice. So that was my answer to that. Hopefully that resonates.
I worked at a legal organization. And before I started working there, I thought that the law was designed to protect all of us, and that the law was written by people way smarter than me to align the hand of justice. But since I have worked there, I have realized that in many ways, the law does not serve all of us. And in many ways, the law is used to punish certain kinds of people. And that was a really interesting revelation. So this question of how do you fight against the system without the system changing you is a lot of the work that I do is actually thinking about how the law is fundamentally flawed. We may not change it tomorrow, but this idea that we rely on a Supreme Court that we understand to be partisan, that we call judges conservative or liberal, all of that kind of stuff that we sort of accept as the status quo, all of that indicates to me that there's much more change that needs to happen. And it's not my job to say, well, this is the law and that we just have to follow it. It's my job to think about what are the ways that I can change that. And I can maybe, I feel like the words that I'm trying to say are not break the law, but I think the words that I'm trying to say are how to change things so that the law does the least amount of.
I love that. And I think that's what's the beauty of this group here is that I came at this from a completely business and corporate perspective, and Jack came at it from a legal perspective that I didn't even think about. So take that for what you will.
I do work in the government, so obviously I've had to deal with different administrations and different priorities. And I think that, you know, as I said before, like, I feel like, you know, none of us is gonna like solve every problem. We may not even solve the one that we devote our lives to, right? But at the end of the day, it's about, you know, like I said, passing that baton, you know, making it easier for the next people, the next set of people that are trying to address the problem or are affected by it. And so I think that, you know, nothing we create will ever be perfect because we're humans. I think that's, you know, obviously we subscribe to this democratic experiment where we have a certain set of rules and certain structures that we subscribe to try to influence and to change. And I think what has sort of given me sort of the motivation or the optimism always to go on it and at it is that throughout human history, we've been able to make changes for the better. We've also made changes for the worse, right? Because we're human. Good decisions and bad decisions will come out about what we do. But I think that like fundamentally, if we keep going at it, it'll be easier for the next set of people to work on it. So like, the optimism and the whole hope and the young people thing that we were talking about before is because like I am optimistic that that some of the work that folks that that are working on, Jackie, Zach, thrown on here, like I'm hopeful that they will be passing, and making it easier for the next set of people who work on it, who work on the problem.
Yeah, I think that's so important, right? Because hard change is hard and often takes generations to make those changes. So we may not see the changes that we want to see in our lifetime. We probably won't, let's be honest. So like, everything's contextual. Easy change is easy, hard change is hard.
I see Shama is giving me the nod. Zarna, is there any last thing that you wanted to say before we close out, or no pressure?
I think one thing that stood out to me, I'm gonna go back to the code a little bit, is what I took away from it is that change for myself and change for the system are two separate things. And the change for myself is bad. But I also see that as a missed opportunity. Like, I think if we're not changing, we're not growing. And this is where that environment comes into play. The environment is shifting, the needs are changing. And if I don't internalize that, I don't know if I am fighting for the most important thing that I can deliver in that time. So I think a shift in perspective about how we see change for ourselves is really important, especially because there is no way to isolate ourselves from the system. We are part of it. So the more we can recognize that change is growth for ourselves is really going to be important.
Well, thank you all. Please give yourselves a round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists, Jackie, Nick, Sarna, Zach. And thank you all for being here tonight and all of those who are joining us virtually. The conversation was amazing and your questions, as Jackie said, were on fire. So, I mean, I feel like we didn't have enough time to address it all, but we will check with our panelists and then share contact information so that if you'd like to continue conversations or have further questions, you can keep connect with them. So I just wanted to close out this session. This is our second WLP for this summer. We have our next session coming up next Wednesday, and the topic we'll be addressing is public policy in the HPI community, specifically topics around economics, immigration, healthcare, and more. So that'll be on June 18th. Please make sure that you register for that session and for the remaining, I think we have 4 sessions left this summer. Feel free to also follow us on social media at Kapal DC. And thank you for our 2025 sponsors and for your continued support for our programs and providing opportunities such as these for our HPI community. We still have a lot of pizza left over, so we can move this over to the room over there for the next few minutes. I don't know how much longer we have the space for. Maybe like 15, 20?
Yeah, like 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, so you can continue networking, grab some more food. Also, feel free to take away plates for lunch for tomorrow. We don't want to waste any of the food. So thank you all for coming tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, I have the privilege to be an owner in a restaurant, so I have vouchers for everyone here.
Yeah.
Yes, everyone in the room, you're all my friends now.
Yeah.